Welcome back to Cynthia Untamed, your youthful and educative platform. My name is Cynthia Nyongesa. If you have not watched my previous videos, please make sure you do. I talk about youthful and educational stuff that affect children and youth in Africa. Did you know that the 16th of June marks the Day of the African Child? If you didn't, now you know. What has been your experience growing up as a child in Africa? I really want to know. Please comment in the comment section below. Just so you know how this day began, in 1976, children marched up in the streets of Soweto demanding for better quality education. Soweto is in South Africa, and as you know, South Africa has a history of apartheid. This is where black people were mistreated by the people who were in charge of the regime then. And so many children died demanding for quality education on that particular day. And the Africa Union, then the Organization of African Unity, Unity decided that this day would be marked as the Day of the African Child to celebrate all African children. My video today is my perspective on the rights and the situation of children in Africa. Based on my own perspective, I have worked in spaces where there are children and young people for about 5 years now as a volunteer, as a writer, as a speaker in different perspectives. So today I'm just sharing my observations as a young African. First things first is the quality of education in Africa. And I am speaking about education specifically because I am a champion of education. Knowing that many children and young people in Africa come from poor families or middle income families, education really is their only way out into a better future for themselves. If they are not able to go to school, then they're never going to be able to make anything out of themselves. And I know education is not just about the grades, getting an A, getting good marks in school. It's also about the skills that young people gain while they are in school. So education is really multi-dimensional. I've been lucky enough to go to about 7 schools, 5 primary schools and 2 high schools, all at different levels. So I have made different observations both in private schools, in public schools, in provincial secondary schools and national high schools. Now what I continue to see is there disparity in access to education, not just in Kenya but in Africa. If you go to public schools, many public schools don't have toilets. I was in a public primary school at some point where the girls' toilets did not have electricity. So remember, we used to go into those toilets and you're really struggling to see, especially morning hours or on cold days when it was dark and the sun was not out. It was really difficult, and especially we had like junior primary toilets and senior primary toilets. So junior primary toilets were really not the best, and we had to sneak into senior primary toilets. And also in public schools, what you see is lack of access to water. Water is so important. There is no way children will stay healthy in school without water. So I see many schools continue to lack this. When I was in a public primary school, just here in Nairobi, in some classes, children used to share desks. I don't know what you call them out of Kenya, but here in Kenya, it's a locker or a desk. And some classes, children used to share this thing. So you'd find like one desk is shared by 2 children because the space either is not enough in class, or sometimes there are no resources to buy those desks. And many of the classrooms are overcrowded, which means there isn't one-on-one teacher interaction in those classrooms. Of course, then quality of education and access to resources in schools then determines the motivation of the learners in that school and the teachers and the community at large. When I was in a provincial school, we could only access the lab, the science labs, when we had a session going on, like a class session. But when I went to a national school, all I had to do was go talk to the lab technician, tell her or him that I needed to do an extra session of a practical chemistry experiment, and she or he would prepare the resources for me, and I could go anytime I did not have a class going on. So I could see the disparity having come from a provincial school and going to a national school. I already knew that there was disparity in resources and disparity in access to opportunity. Like I said, education is multi-dimensional. You'll also find different aspects like access to menstrual hygiene care in schools. You'll find a disparity in access to sexual reproductive health care in schools, access to nutrition, access to meals, access to dorm capacity, access to playgrounds. Playgrounds, people, playgrounds. There are some schools that don't have playgrounds. I was in a public primary school at some point where we had to use the golf course as our playground. Can you imagine? So some schools don't have playgrounds, and I'm still yet to understand why some schools don't have playgrounds. I know there's a lot of land grabbing, but yes, I see those disparities from my observations. Having gone again to a private primary school, I also saw that access to education is also determined by the sacrifices of our parents. So some parents are not necessarily wealthy, but they will take loans. They'll do so much just to take their children to high-end schools so that they access the best education. And this is not to say that if you come from a rich family, it is a bad thing. You did not choose to be born poor or rich. Everybody was just born and found themselves there. But I think it is our responsibility to ensure that every child has access. When you talk about basic quality education, we're not talking about basics like you're just there, you appear in school and go back home. No, we need every child to be happy and have a learner-friendly environment when they are in schools. My second observation is on the justice system for children and youth in Africa. Now, being a Kenyan, I have been to courts and to children's homes, and to be honest, there are so many children who are still suffering out here. There are many children who are stuck in the justice system. And initially, when I was thinking of bringing children out of the justice system as a career, I realized I used to think it's just because these children were not aware of the laws, so they just decided to break them, then they found themselves there. But what I have come to discover over the most recent years is that many of these children stuck in the justice system found themselves there by way of circumstance. So, like for example, one child was telling me that they found themselves in the justice system because they came from a broken home, and in this home they did not have access to food, shelter and clothing. So one day this child was very hungry, went on to the neighbor's house, stole a banana, ate it, and then the neighbor took them to a police station, and that is how the child got stuck in the justice system. Now, what I have observed in the justice system, and especially it being so dynamic and being so complex, is that I feel like the justice system should really be the last resort where children find themselves in. Honestly, I think the best way to empower children is to prevent them from getting into the justice system in the first place. Because some children get into the justice system, for example, like this child just stole a banana because they were hungry, but they get into the justice system and they are influenced by other young people who have been exposed to crime, and so they're influenced to also get into crime. So by the time this child gets out of the court, maybe after serving a sentence of 3 years, they go back, they commit another crime, they go back to jail. Once they're in jail, they come out, they go back, they come out, they go back, and hence it becomes a cycle of injustice and a cycle of poverty in our country and in Africa in general. What I also see in the justice system is not necessarily the lack of effort on the side of the justice system, which is then the government and NGOs, to remove these children from the justice system. Sometimes you'll find a lawyer working on a children's case, but the parents are not willing to take back their child. You find that the parent will say, this child is bad, they already ruined me, I no longer want this child. So what does this child do? They have no alternatives. Either they will stay in the justice system or they'll go into the streets and commit crime. This is why there's so many children stuck in the justice system. We really have a broken system. And my appeal to society is that let us not allow children to even get into the justice system in the first place. Because when they get into the justice system, it's so hard to remove. And you see, even if this child goes back home, there's something called trauma. You know, when they're out there and they're in prison and they hear the stories of other children who've gone through so many bad situations, they go back with trauma. And if they don't even undergo proper counseling, they will grow up with trauma. And what happens? They become adults with trauma. And then what happens again? They'll give back to children and raise them with trauma. Which is why the children's justice system really is very complex. And I appreciate organizations that are working to involve children in participation, in knowledge of the laws, knowledge of the constitution. I think this is really one step to enabling children not to get into the justice system in the first place. But to be honest, many of the children in the justice system are there by way of circumstances. Some of them are really children in need of protection. Let us not assume that every child in the justice system committed a crime. Many of them are children in need of protection. Maybe they were being abused when they were at home. And so they were taken up and taken into children's homes or children's institutions that are managed by the government, and they got there. And there is no way for them to get out until the person who was abusing them is held accountable. So many of these children are really children in need of care and protection. They're not necessarily children who are in conflict with the law, which is why I emphasize again that children really should not get into the justice system in the first place. Let's find ways of addressing the systemic issues that make them find themselves there, which includes violence against children. It includes lack of access to education, because many of the times if they go into prison, they won't access education. Maybe they'll even stop going to school at that point. And by the time they're recovering and trying to go back to school, they're much older. Time has passed. They have trauma. This is the problem. And also, we need to have families that are together. Because you see, when a family is broken, it's very easy for this child to get lost. Let's have systems that really protect children. Because I think if we protect children in our communities, from the community or from the school level or from the family level, I don't think we're going to have so many children stuck in the justice system. To be honest, there are many of them who are stuck there, and they may be stuck there for a very, very long time. But this is not to say that people are not working to end this. But really, I feel like the best solution is for them not to get into the justice system in the first place. I also have an observation when it comes to technology, access to technology and internet connection for children in Kenya and in Africa. Now, the world is increasingly becoming connected. Let's not sit and say the internet is completely evil, so let's get rid of this internet. We need technology. We need this internet so that children can learn. They'll learn new skills. They'll watch people who are not in this country. They'll be able to watch President Obama giving his addresses right from the internet. They'll be able to attend classrooms right from the internet. But what I'm also seeing is an increase in violence against children on the internet. So a child will be there very innocently using their phone on Facebook and all that. Someone will come, stalk them, then tell them, oh, let's be friends. They're children, they're innocent, they'll accept to be friends. Next thing, your child is going to see someone who we don't even know who it is, and they're abused, they're raped, they're sodomized, they're violated. The internet space is really dangerous. Also, you'll find children who post their own pictures on social media, or parents who post photos of their children on social media. You'll find that those children are also vulnerable to attacks, because people now will come, they'll start commenting on the image of your child, they'll start commenting on their skin color, they'll comment on their features. Most probably if your child has a disability, they'll say something against them, which is not a good thing. So I think in as much as we are becoming an increasingly connected world, I think we also need to protect our children as they get into the internet space, because you're not going to say at this rate that children won't access the internet until they turn 18. I do not think that is possible. I do not think that is possible. I know many children don't have access to the internet, but children are increasingly becoming connected on the internet. So let's find ways of protecting them while they are online. Something else that I also see on the internet is the ability to learn. I was watching a clip about Singapore and how children are learning about robotics and artificial intelligence using the internet. It's part of their curriculum. So if we use this space really well, I think the internet and technology is a really good space, because when you look at many fields right now, many fields really need the use of technology, and it's literally every space. Look at medicine, for example. Right now we are having robots that they're made in such a way that they can do operations, precise and accurate operations, without having to cut so much of a person's body. We're also seeing technology even in law firms. People thought that law firms don't need technology. Right now it's coronavirus pandemic season, all that. People are not able to go to court. If you do not have an online system, I do not know how you guys are managing your justice system. I do not know. I think this is another conversation. But yes, all places require technology. They require the internet. We really need to have proper use of technology, and especially for the children and youth of Africa to benefit from this space. Now, I'll talk about healthcare. I'm not a healthcare professional, so let me talk about a field that I have been especially exposed to, and that is the field of nutrition. Now, let me tell you, children will not be able to go to school or live healthy lives if they're not eating healthy food. So let me just talk about two young people here in Kenya who I know are really working to provide access to nutrition for children. There's one guy called Francis Amonde Otieno, and he does a feeding program, provides porridge to vulnerable children in public primary schools in the country. So what he does, he has an organization where he fundraises and makes porridge for children, and children have a cup of porridge every single day, and 1 cup of porridge encourages children to go to school. Can you imagine? And he tells me that he has seen transformation in many children, because at some point he found a child in nursery school who was malnutrition, but because of the 1 cup of porridge, things have changed. The child is more healthy, they're able to go to school, they're happier, which tells you the importance of food. Food and nutrition is really important. Another young person I know is Wawira Njiru, and she runs Food for Education. Now, what she has been doing over the last, I think, 8 years is she has been cooking food for children in public schools here in Kenya. And what she does, she makes sure that every child has a plate of food every day. And because of that, just like Francis, there are children who are going to school just to eat that 1 plate of food. And she says that some children have siblings in other schools that don't benefit from her program. So you'll find them coming, then they get the food, they eat just a little, and then they carry some for their siblings. Because trust me, there are children in this continent who do not have food. It is true, they don't have food and they don't have regular access to food. And a child who is malnutrition cannot live a healthy life. That's one dynamic of nutrition. The other dynamic is children who have food, but they're not eating the right food. So at breakfast, they eat a burger. At lunchtime, they eat fries. At dinner time, they eat a pizza. And which is why you're finding so many children in Kenya and in Africa are overweight, because these foods are not healthy. And I'm not going to start judging parents who give children these kinds of food, but I think we need to be careful in what we give our children. I think if you can afford to buy pizza in this country, pizza is very expensive. I think it's like $10. I think instead of using 1,000 shillings to buy pizza, you can buy fresh vegetables, you can make porridge, you can make some rice and beans, you can buy some milk. I think children can eat these things once in a while, but they really need to eat what is healthy, what is good for their bodies. because children who are overweight, also just like children who are malnutrition, are not healthy children. And that's why you'll find many of them getting lifestyle diseases early on in life. So it's so important for us to focus on the two dynamics of nutrition: lack of access to food and having access to food that is not good for the body. And what I also see is that what you feed your child from an early age determines how they grow into their adulthood. Because if they start eating burgers from the age of 3, every other day, every other time, you know, they just drink soda, they never drink milk, they never drink water, then what you'll find is that as they grow, then they become obese, they're not healthy. And what I also see in our society, like I mentioned on the internet space, is a lot of cyberbullying. So I think cyberbullying is not good, but if there are ways for us to prevent and feed our children on a healthy diet, I think we are also going to reduce some instances of body shaming. Not all of them, just some that are majorly caused by obesity. There's a famous phrase that says, your gift will enable you to stand before great men. And the reason why I'm emphasizing on this is that I really want to encourage our society to start enabling our children to discover their talents early in life. And talent can be from writing to poetry to music to acting to, I mean, look at our social media right now. It's the people who have talents online that are getting opportunities. They're getting opportunities with brands, they're getting opportunities with organizations, and it's not necessarily something they studied in school. Not to say that education is not important, but I think we need to start nurturing the talents of our children very early on in life, because later on they can monetize this. You know, right now with the economy, we really need to find different streams of income. You might have your 9-to-5 job and then also have something else that gives you money on the side, so that your 9-to-5 job could be your savings, and then your other streams of income can enable you to have your recurrent expenditure, and that way you're able to stay afloat. So which is why I think it's important. We are seeing so many people who've made careers out of their talents, and right now the competence-based curriculum, I think, is trying to nurture those. And people who went to the Kenyan education system in the 80s and 90s tell me it was very strong then. Children were encouraged to explore different perspectives of their talents and academics as well. So I think we need to really encourage that. Life is not just about books. It's important to read, it's important to score well, it's important to do well in class. But let us also pay attention to talents. Let us pay attention to skills like coding. Let us pay attention to people who are influencing conversations online. These are the modern trends. We need to adapt to the future jobs. We need to really adapt so that our children are able to live in a society that is continuously versatile, so that they are very flexible. Let's not live in a rigid world. That is it for today on Cynthia Untamed, your youthful and educational platform. Remember, today is the Day of the African Child, but let us not celebrate children on the 16th of June only. Let us celebrate them every day. Let us enable them to dream big and to hope deeply. Make sure you check my other videos and tell a friend to tell a friend. Until next time, see you